Steve Voorhees was born on March 6, 1951 in Portland, Oregon, and is currently 64 years old. Steve was born during an era of unrest between communist and capitalist societies. At the end of World War II, Vietnam was struggling to be seen as an independent nation. For many years, they fought the French for independence. Then, in 1954, a few years after Steve was born, the Viet Minh gained strength in North Vietnam and seized the French command post after a 56-day fight. This victory gave the Viet Minh leverage in the 1954 Geneva Accords, which temporarily partitioned Vietnam at the 17th parallel, and commissioned the French to withdraw its forces to that line. Once Vietnam was split, North Vietnam wanted to unify the country under a communist regime modeled off of the Soviet Union and China. However, the South did not want this, creating a conflict between the two parts of the country. This is when the United States originally got involved with Vietnam because of their fear of communism. I asked Steve what he remembered about communism at this time.
Would have been pretty young, probably 5, 6 years old when you were told in no uncertain terms that the enemy of the United States was the Russians, and that it was the Russians wanted to somehow take over the world. And then slowly over time, it became more pronounced because by the time I was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we were actually going through drills where we would get under our desks at school as part of our training in case the Russians attacked us with nuclear weapons.
The communist airstrike drills were the only thing that affiliated Steve to the Vietnam War when he was younger. However, when Steve signed up for the draft and went to college, the war became much more prevalent in his life. Many protests were rising on college campuses at this time, causing tensions between students and authorities.
My freshman year, that's when they had gunned down those kids on the college campus at Kent State. Shot down 4 kids, the National Guard did, who were protesting the war. So it became very intense. In that one year, what had sort of been something you saw on the evening news with your family became something that was a big focus. The Eugene police did a pretty good job keeping things in control, and when the county sheriffs showed up, they'd show up with buses of these county sheriffs during big demonstrations, and you could just see them licking their chops for an opportunity to kind of go after the kids, and I saw that happen a couple times. And I was actually arrested during one of these demonstrations and saw some pretty rough treatment.
While Steve was in school protesting against the war, the draft was still going on. The way each person was assigned their draft number was by watching TV or listening to the radio. Each broadcasted the picking of draft numbers. There would be small capsules containing dates of the year in a jar that were picked and then assigned a draft number. For example, if January 1st was picked, everyone ages 18 to 26 born on January 1st would be draft number 1. For Steve's birthday, March 6th, his draft number was 296. By his sophomore year in college, the amount of people being drafted was much less, and numbers were only getting up to 60 or 70. However, Steve was still drafted.
A letter telling me when to report to the Selective Service Office for processing. And because I had this great big giant fabulous draft number, I thought what had happened when I signed up for the Selective Service at age 18, I'd already knew I didn't like this Vietnam War at all. And I had taken with me letters from my doctor because I had some football injuries that I had hurt my knees, and I had a knee condition when I was 18. And so I gave it to the draft board thinking maybe someday this will do me some good if I ever happen to get drafted. So when I got my notice during my sophomore year, and it was like in January, early January, to come and, get processed, I thought, well, hey, they're just going to take a look and, give me what was then called a 4F, in other words. And, I couldn't think why they were calling me, and that was the only reason I could dream up.
Receiving a 4F meant the registrant was not qualified to go into the military because of a physical or mental handicap. I then asked Steve what his experience was like going to the Selective Service Office.
You walk into this testing office, and they have you take all your clothes off but your underwear, and line up in a line, and you're standing on a line that's drawn on the floor. And so you all stand next to each other on the line, and then they'd have you do a quarter turn, and the line moves through the office. And you walk in single file as a group of 25 along this line. And the line will take you to, for instance, a place to check your vision. So you'd walk up to this spot, and there'd be a guy there with his little, thing to look in your eyes with. And he'd take the first guy, and he'd look in his eyes and move him on and look in the next guy's eyes. And you'd just walk down the line, and they'd look at your eyes. And then you'd go down the hall a little ways, and there'd be a guy there, and he would check your hearing. And so you'd get your hearing checked. And I just followed these people in front of me as they slowly, and I'm going, this is ridiculous. Why are they doing this? I thought they wanted to know about my knees.
The Selective Service Office was the place where all drafted men went to get checked out. Each man would go through a single-file line receiving a basic checkup. Eventually, each man would individually be allowed to meet with the doctor for any other medical reasons.
I go in, and I start talking to the guy, and he's asking me all these questions. And I say, well, what about my knees? And he says, what about your knees? I said, well, isn't that why I'm here? Because my knees? Because I sent these letters in? He says, you ain't got no knee problem that we're concerned about. No, you're here because you're getting inducted to go to Vietnam. And I thought, there is no frickin' way this is possibly happening to me, So I come out of that room shocked and get back in the line and, go marching down the hall. I've got my piece of paper, walk up, hand him my piece of paper, and he has a big stamp. And it goes bang on that piece of paper that I've got my medical, and it says inducted right across the front of it, bang. Mm-hmm. And on his desk, which has a little glass cover, wood desk with a piece of glass on the top, underneath it, he's got this peace sign, and underneath it says, footprint of the American chicken.
What did you think when you saw that?
I could tell I was not among my friends.
At this point in the draft process, each man was to sign a document stating that they were not a communist or affiliated with the Communist Party in any way. Then they were to return home and wait and see if they would receive a letter in the mail telling them when to report and when they would leave for Vietnam.
And I drove immediately to the Selective Service Office and walked through the door and literally yelled in the place, I want to know what the fuck is going on here. And I had immediate attention. I didn't have to wait in line. And that's when I got taken up. I said, I've just been inducted. I don't get what's going on. I have a high number. And, I thought I was pulled up here just for a physical exam. And so they go to find Voorhees, and they pull out my little manila file, and on the front of it is written your birthday in great big giant bold letters. And they showed my birthday as being February 6th instead of March 6th of 1951. And the February 6th number for your draft was number 16. So I was getting inducted because they claimed, and I always wondered, that they had simply transposed a number. And so they told me, you're right. You shouldn't have gone through all that. If you get your notice to, go into the military, you can ignore it.
Steve ended up not having to go to Vietnam, all because he drove to the office and found out his birthday was accidentally written down wrong. Going through the draft process and finding out it was a mistake has made Steve question a lot about war and its process.
It's kind of left me skeptical of many of these military decisions and whether there's really a good reason. And so it's probably, it's very hard to convince me that these wars are worth it.